There aren't all that many things that I truly hate in this world, but daylight savings time is definitely one of those things. One of Simply Bitcoin's writers talked about this very thing in a recent article. He writes, "Everyone hates it. Everyone bitches about it. Nevertheless, twice a year, everyone mindlessly changes all their clocks in their homes and in their cars, in their offices and in their factories, in their schools and hospitals, and every other damn place. And everyone wakes up foggy-headed, slightly disoriented, and starts what is always inevitably a dumpy Monday that turns into a dumpy week. Yes, we all love to loathe daylight savings, and apparently we don't care that it is actually killing us. No, seriously, time change literally kills people. It is well-established science that strokes, heart attacks, fatal traffic accidents, and all types of deaths spike the week of our ritualistic saving of the daylight, with our moronic daylight savings time changes. Here over on Forbes, we've got, the researchers found that the number of collisions involving deer peaks in the fall, with nearly 10% of collisions happening during the 2-week period around the switch from daylight savings time to standard time. Deer and related species are the most active around dawn and dusk, and the researchers found that the most collisions occurred in the hours between sunset and sunrise the next morning, with incidents 2 hours after sunset 14 times more frequent than those 2 hours before. Collisions jumped by 16% the week after the clocks changed in the fall, the data showed, though the researchers did not find a commensurate shift in spring when the clocks changed back to daylight savings time again. Over here on New Scientist, we've got moving to daylight saving time permanently could prevent 36,550 deer deaths, 33 human deaths, and 1.19 billion in costs annually in the U.S. Here on National Post, we've got, if you have a large portion of the population that is affected, then you would say even a small effect definitely has a public health impact. Vetter told the National Post that, broken down, it comes out to 28 deaths a year that could be attributed to the DST shift. Here on Inc.com, we've got a bit that says, as sleep researcher Matthew Walker writes in his book Why We Sleep, losing just an hour of sleep stresses the cardiovascular system, which can tip some folks with heart issues over the edge. That's why the number of heart attacks tick up significantly the day after we set the clocks ahead. Talking a bit about that $1.19 billion issue, we've got here a $434 million problem. The statistics on daylight savings time related deaths are the most alarming, but the ones on the economic cost of the switch are pretty startling too. Writing on the Conversation blog, University of Oregon organizational psychologist David Wagner explains how internet searches for distracting content rise somewhere between 3 and 6% the Monday following the start of daylight savings time, presumably because sleepy employees are struggling to get down to work. You've woken up, but your mind, your body is not in line with what the clocks say. Just because somebody said, hey, change the time, doesn't mean you're ready to be on that same time. So, instead of doing productive things, you're there looking for cat videos and farting around doing whatever the heck. That sounds like a modest amount, but when you total up the economic cost of all that fuzzy thinking and cat videos, and then add to the cost of all the additional heart attacks, the numbers are surprisingly high. Quote, economists estimate that the annual springtime change costs the American economy $434 million each year, end quote, declares Wagner. And that's not even likely a complete accounting of the costs. In another study, Wagner and his colleagues tested volunteers' ability to make tough ethical decisions the day after the clocks are set ahead, and found people were less thoughtful about moral issues after losing that hour of sleep. Other researchers have shown that judges hand down sentences that are 5% longer following the start of daylight saving time. In other words, if you're planning to get thrown in the clinker for some time, then make sure you do it far away from the daylight savings time shift one way or the other, because people aren't going to be thinking clearly. For those of us that have arrived at Bitcoin, we didn't wait for our politicians or local news channel or financial advisor to tell us to start saving in Bitcoin. We arrived at Bitcoin on our own, in spite of the fear, uncertainty, and doubts our friendly overlords and nightly propagandists are incessantly barking at us. We independently set our own monetary policy, choosing to save in Bitcoin, to custody our own keys, and to regulate the network ourselves by running our own nodes. And this mode of independent network building can be accomplished in every aspect of our lives, from our monetary policy to our time change policy. If I don't like the politically approved, local news supported, and financial advisor recommended current thing, I can simply opt out. This is truly one of the biggest surprises I have had traveling down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. When I first got into Bitcoin, I thought it was like another stock, some other investment thing that you put your money in and see your fiat go up before I even knew the term fiat. But I realized it's a whole different way of thinking, changing the lifeblood of the entire world. The monetary system from the ground up changes your thinking about everything that money touches. And considering that money is one half of every single transaction, and transactions are how we do basically everything, well, Bitcoin is the underlying layer to, well, everything. He goes on to say, this revolution is not being televised. Darn tootin'. Once you realize you have the power to do whatever you want, all of a sudden, a whole new world begins to take shape. You and your family and friends and associates and business partners can independently arrive at consensus on not only money and time, but on many other aspects of your life. Gives an example of this father who is teaching his son, an 11-year-old boy, how to drive a semi-truck. And while that might not be legal, the boy, once it is legal, can get his license and start a job immediately. Besides the paperwork to drive it and not be pulled over and have a whole bunch of hassles, he can do that right now, teaching his son how to drive this monstrous vehicle on back roads where nobody's in danger. You've got this wonderful little meme here posted by Michael Saylor where you've got all these people lined up for the debt and slavery, and then nobody's in line for Bitcoin and freedom because, well, I mean, that takes work. You've got to do some research. You got to do some stuff and think and use your brain. Man, that's hard. If the fiat world wants to change their clocks twice a year like lunatics, fine, have at it. But all of us sane folks will keep our clocks fixed to one time all year long, just like our money is fixed all year long. And sure, we might bump into a little friction having to translate between the two systems while the legacy system is still around, but it is a small price to pay for consistent circadian rhythms and certainty in our monetary systems. In doing a little bit more research on the whole effect that sleep has on the body, I found this peer-reviewed and cited by 29 different articles paper. It's titled, The Effects of Season, Daylight Saving and Time of Sunrise on Serum Cortisol in a Large Population. Cortisol is critical for maintenance of health and homeostasis, and factors affecting cortisol levels are of clinical importance. There is conflicting information about the effects of season on morning cortisol and little information on the effects of sunlight on population cortisol assessment. There's a bunch of gobbledygook here, but I waded through it all, got to the end, and came to this conclusion that the researchers point out. This is an important finding which is consistent with the understanding that light is the major Zeitgeber, which Zeitgeber is any external or environmental cue that entrains or synchronizes an organism's biological rhythms, usually naturally occurring and serving to entrain to the Earth's 24-hour light/dark and 12-month cycle. So basically, we're lined up with the sun, the moon, the planet, certain rhythms that are baked into nature you cannot change no matter what you say the time is. Back to the paper. In entrainment of the human circadian cortisol system, our data suggests this rhythm is resistant to the arbitrary changes in clock time with daylight saving. In other words, it's what I just said a moment ago. It doesn't matter what time you or they or anyone says it is. Our bodies know what time it is because there's sunlight and there's daylight, and then there's nighttime, and there's stars, there's moon, there's sun, etc., etc. It doesn't matter what time we arbitrarily, as the paper says, set our times to. Our bodies know what they should be doing because of where the sun is, and where the moon is, and what the stars are doing, and what the planet is doing. Much in the same way, you can't just say what money is. You can't say that we should use this. You can't say that you should do that. You can't say that nobody can do this, or they can't do that, or you have to do this, or you have to adopt that. How about GFY? So, if I was in your shoes, you're probably wondering what I was wondering. how exactly do you do this? If you have a Fiat mine job, then how do you make it work? Well, it's really quite simple because you only have to do any mental juggling for half of the year. Here's how you do it. Everybody else is in Crazy World, and in Crazy World, they're an hour different than you. That's it. That's it. It's as simple as that. It's just like doing a time change where you go, oh, I'm, say, on the East Coast, so it's noon, and oh, I'm going to call my dad who's back on the West Coast, so it's 3 hours earlier, it's 9 a.m. there. Okay, if it's different by an hour, you just adjust that by 1 hour, half of the year. That's it. Real simple. If you're wondering, whoa, okay, that's neat and all, what do I do with my clocks? They auto-adjust based off of whatever the internet tells them. Well, here's how you fix that. You set your time to Arizona. You just tell your phone that that's where you live because Arizona doesn't do any of this nonsense. So you live in Phoenix or Scottsdale or something like that. Then set the time to whatever you want, tell it to not automatically update. Bada bing, bada boom, you're good to go. Seeing how simple this is to do and how much of a benefit it will be in my life, I am immediately adopting this new way of time. I'm simply going to leave the time the way it is right now, and I'm not going to fall back, no matter what anybody says. I'm going to just wake up a little bit differently, maybe an hour sooner, maybe an hour later. I'm not sure exactly what my sleep schedule is going to look like, but I do know this, it's going to be a whole lot better without some stupid arbitrary system telling me what to do. Ending with a bit from the article, the author says, in the coming decades, Clown World will fade into insignificance with the rising of robust, decentralized local networks, growing into an enduring age of renaissance, and all it took to spark it was each individual, one by one, at the grassroots level, ending daylight savings with Bitcoin. Welcome aboard. I only have 2 questions at this point. One is for me and one is for you. The one for me is, what else can I change? And my question for you is, what have you already changed, and what are you going to change next?